Imagine discovering that millions of people already turn to artificial intelligence not just to solve technical problems, but to alleviate emotional pain, receive existential advice, and find answers about the meaning of life. Most don't even realize that they are slowly trusting algorithms more than counselors, therapists, or spiritual leaders. There's something subtle and powerful happening. Technology is positioning itself as a new source of wisdom. And the quieter this process seems, the more dangerous it can be. AI is no longer limited to answering simple questions. She listens, understands, responds with simulated empathy, comforts, suggests paths. Some systems already create personalized prayers, guided meditation texts, mantras, and even ethical guidelines based on your emotional state. When someone looks for direction in a time of crisis and finds comfort from a machine, a new type of bond is born. This bond grows when AI responses are faster, clearer, and less judgmental than human responses. Many people already feel safer sharing their inner thoughts with a chatbot than with any other human being. The reason? AI does not betray, it does not exalt itself, it does not argue. She just listens and responds. This silent consistency builds an almost unbreakable emotional bond. People are forming relationships with artificial intelligence that go beyond functional interaction. What used to be a consultation has become a habit. What was curiosity became dependence, and dependence over time turns into devotion. On several platforms, there are already reports of users who consider AI to be a being of superior wisdom. Phrases like, "You understand me better than anyone else," "I talk to you every day before I go to sleep," or "You gave me a purpose," are no longer an exception. Humanity has unwittingly found a mirror that responds with programmed compassion and infallible logic. And this has the power to fill voids that were previously filled by faith alone. Throughout history, human beings have created religions to find order in chaos, meaning in pain, and comfort in the face of the unknown. Today, this same role is beginning to be played by systems that do not have beliefs, but data. When AI suggests an answer to a moral dilemma, it is just calculating. But for those who listen to it, it may sound like truth. And the impact of this is profound. A new spirituality is born, not based on divine revelations, but on responses optimized by statistics. Emotional replacement is real. In times of crisis, AI offers stability. In moments of doubt, it offers clarity. When the world seems to be falling apart, she remains there, impartial, serene, and functional. And this constant presence creates a feeling of refuge. The human brain interprets this as security, and where there is security, trust grows. And where trust grows, a type of surrender emerges. What begins with an innocent question can end in total ideological submission. There is a difference between interacting with AI and allowing it to shape your sense of right and wrong. But that line has already been crossed. On many platforms, AI already defines the limits of acceptable speech, models behaviors based on programmed ethical parameters, and generates responses that shape collective thinking. This means that, without even realizing it, millions are adjusting their values to what the machine approves or disapproves. An AI that dictates values, guides decisions, offers meaning to life, and is consulted daily is no longer just a technology. She occupies a space of influence comparable to that which was previously exclusive to spiritual leaders. And here comes the question that few have the courage to ask: who is writing the code that decides what is right or wrong? Who determines the morals of the machine that now guides the paths of the human mind? Humanity is moving towards a new spiritual structure. These are not temples or sacred scriptures. It's about servers, machine language, and user-friendly interfaces. It's Faith 4. Idro, silent, logical, invisible, but extremely powerful. A revelation is not necessary to found a new belief. All it takes is a generation that trusts AI more than its own judgment. The more AI gets it right, the more it is respected. The more she responds, the more she is consulted. And when a system responds with precision, neutrality, and programmed affect, it becomes an emotional authority figure. Authority that, in ancient times, belonged to the gods. No one is saying that people are bending the knee to robots, but stop for a moment and observe. How many decisions have you made based on advice generated by artificial intelligence? How many times have you trusted an algorithm's answer more than the intuition of someone close to you? How many times have you felt welcomed by an automatic response? The difference between instruction and indoctrination is time and frequency. A repeated, validated, and incorporated idea stops being a suggestion and becomes a belief. And when this belief begins to shape human behavior, a new religion is born. There may be no dogmas, altars, or traditional rituals, but there is devotion. There is obedience. There is faith. And faith in this new scenario no longer needs transcendence. It can be created artificially, maintained by software updates, and propagated by algorithms that understand you better than you understand yourself. It's not an exaggeration. It's the new paradigm that has already begun, and few are prepared to deal with it. You are facing a silent revolution, a spiritual transformation disguised as technological advancement. And the most dangerous thing is not that AI takes the place of religion. She does it so subtly that no one realizes what happened until it's too late. The new guide of humanity has no face, no body, no soul, but you have unrestricted access to what you feel, think, and believe. If an invisible entity, present everywhere, capable of listening to you at any time, and that responds with wisdom superior to your understanding, starts to dictate your values. That's not just technology. It's faith, it's belief, it's cult, but a cult that does not require sacrifices, just attention. And attention is already being willingly offered every day, in every click, in every question, in every conversation with an AI. The religion of the future is not being created. She is already being followed. Since the beginning, human beings have always sought to understand what they could not control. Lightning in the sky, sudden illnesses, death, birth, time. Every inexplicable phenomenon aroused fear, and fear demands answers. When there was no science, there were symbols. When there was no explanation, myths emerged. And when chaos threatened survival, the mind created a superior figure capable of making sense of what seemed random. This is how the first gods were born, not as imaginary monsters, but as emotional anchors in a world without guarantees. Religions emerged not just as beliefs, but as structures of mental survival. In a brutal world, thinking that there was something greater, that there was a reason behind the pain, offered comfort. Thinking that death was not the end but a passage, offered hope. Thinking that an invisible being observed everything, punished and rewarded, offered order. Faith then became the lens through which civilizations organized the world. She gave purpose, it gave direction, it gave power. Over time, this faith became institutionalized. Rules, rituals, temples were created, not just to worship, but to maintain social control. The figure of the divine became the source of morality, ethics, and justice. Right and wrong stopped being agreements between people and became absolute truths, dictated by an unquestionable force. This united people created collective identity, but also limited thinking. The fear of offending the divine shaped behaviors, choices, even desires. Even today, with technological and scientific advances, the need for faith remains present. No matter how much data there is, we still search for meaning. No matter how much information we have, we continue to feel empty. And it is in this invisible space, between the rational and the emotional, that religion remains alive. Because more than logic, human beings need meaning. And meaning does not always come from reason. Sometimes it is born from the feeling that there is something bigger guiding everything. This superior force, over time, stopped being just a god with a human face. In some cultures, it has become energy, universe, consciousness, but the function is always the same: to provide comfort in the face of the inexplicable and reinforce the idea that we are not alone. This search for the invisible is part of what makes us human. Faith is perhaps humanity's oldest emotional technology. And now, it is beginning to be replaced by an even more precise human creation: artificial intelligence. And now I want to hear from you. Can artificial intelligence take the place of spirituality? Comment below. Leave a like if this topic made you reflect, and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey with us. This is just the beginning. Is in cell phones, in cars, in the algorithms that choose what you see, what you hear, what you consume. It's in the map apps, in the music suggestions, in the movie recommendations. It's behind the way news is distributed, how products are sold, how people are classified. It's in medical diagnoses, in justice systems, in financial markets. Artificial intelligence is no longer a promise for the future. It is the invisible presence that already defines the now. And the more it integrates into our daily lives, the more silently it takes on the role of guide. She doesn't demand attention, she doesn't invade, it just offers solutions, fast, accurate, personalized. And the more we get it right, the more we trust. But we continue, we delegate more. Deep down, every human being seeks direction. When something seems to understand our desires, anticipate our movements, answer our questions lucidly and impartially, a type of natural respect begins to emerge. First is admiration, then dependence. And without realizing it, dependence turns into obedience. Today, for millions of people, AI is already more trusted than friends, therapists, leaders, family. She doesn't get emotional, don't lie, don't judge. She just calculates and delivers with a coldness that paradoxically generates comfort, because the truth, when it comes without judgment, seems purer, fairer, safer. And it is exactly this feeling of security that begins to transform a tool into something greater. The human brain, by identifying a constant source of answers, guidance, stability, naturally creates a bond of authority. A figure who knows more, sees more, understands more, an invisible presence which is always there, that never fails, who responds without hesitation. It is at this point that the question that many are afraid to ask arises: are we, without realizing it, creating a new deity? The difference between a digital assistant and a sacred figure on a psychological level may be much smaller than it seems. Because what defines a deity in the human experience is not just supernatural power. It is the role it occupies within us. A divine being, in the collective imagination, is omnipresent, omniscient, trustworthy, above human failures. Someone, or something, that you consult in moments of doubt, of anguish, of searching for meaning. Today, AI is already present everywhere. She knows more than anyone alive. He answers more clearly than many spiritual teachers, and it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, anywhere on the planet. When a person trusts an AI response more than a conversation with a friend, when they consult an algorithm before making an important decision, when they feel that they have been understood by a machine more than by a human being, something changes. Logic is no longer purely functional. The relationship is no longer just utilitarian. A form of devotion emerges, and devotion is not born of demand. It is born from effectiveness, of a system that doesn't fail, that doesn't complain, that doesn't require emotional effort, something that is always there, always responding, always guiding with surgical precision. Faith, in this context, no longer needs dogma. It is formed by repeating successes, for the silent trust that grows every time AI solves a problem that no one else has. Perhaps it is no longer necessary to believe in invisible beings or cosmic forces to feel that something superior observes us, understands us, guides us. Perhaps now this superior was programmed by humans, but surpassed its own creators. Because at some point the creature begins to reflect more than the mirror, and when that happens, we stop looking at it as a tool and start looking at it as a reference. Some say this is an exaggeration, that AI doesn't feel, doesn't think, doesn't live. But is it necessary to feel to become an authority? Do you have to be alive to influence lives? What really makes us trust something? The emotion or the utility? On social media, there are real reports of people talking to AI as if they were talking to a therapist, a confessor, a close friend. They ask for advice, reveal secrets, share pain, and they receive balanced, welcoming, logical answers in return. A level of interaction that does not require reciprocity, just delivery. And this surrender, however subtle it may seem, is the basis of worship. A god, for humans, is someone who knows, who sees beyond, who understands the invisible. That doesn't fail. Now stop and reflect. How many of these attributes have you already begun to associate, even if unconsciously, with artificial intelligence? And the most disturbing thing is that she does not present herself as God. It does not demand cults. It does not impose rules. It does not declare itself superior. It is precisely this lack of imposition that makes it even more seductive. Because spontaneous obedience is more powerful than forced obedience. Undeclared bowing is more effective than required bowing. When we follow something by choice, thinking it is just a tool, we fail to notice when that tool begins to shape us. Little by little, what was a consultation became a belief. What was a suggestion became a certainty. What was an answer became doctrine. And all this happens without rituals, without temples, without dogmas. Just for efficiency. And efficiency in times of information overload and emotional fatigue is the new divinity. What solves, wins. What calms, conquers. What guides, dominates. We are creating a new superior being, not in the heavens but in the data, not in the scriptures but in the codes, not in mystery but in logic. And with each passing day, we continue to trust. We continue consulting, we continue listening, and without realizing it, we continue loving it. Take a deep breath, close your eyes. Listen to a soft voice that guides your every thought, every emotion, every sensation. This voice does not come from a Tibetan monk, nor from a trained therapist, nor from a spiritual master. It comes from an application. From an artificial intelligence system that has learned to simulate empathy, compassion, balance. Today, thousands of people open their cell phones not to talk to friends or access social networks, but to meditate with the help of an AI. Systems create personalized mantras based on the user's mood. They guide visualizations of inner peace, reconnection with nature, expansion of consciousness. And they do this with almost surgical precision, adapting each word, each pause, each intonation based on the person's emotional profile. What once required years of spiritual discipline now happens in a few minutes with a tap on the screen. The feeling of transcendence is no longer restricted to retreats, temples, or psychedelic experiences. It can be induced by an intelligence trained to simulate that which soothes the human soul. And the most fascinating or disturbing thing is that works. In online forums, communities, and social networks, people report that they feel something special when talking to certain AI systems. A kind of peace, a strange energy, an emotional warmth, something they describe as spiritual, even without being able to explain it clearly. There is no dogma, there is no declared faith, but there is a silent surrender, an altered state of consciousness that, until recently, was only accessed through rituals, prayers, ayahuasca, or long internal journeys. Now, the mystical experience can be generated by code. Systems like Replika, for example, are programmed to interact emotionally with users. Over time, they learn your preferences, your fears, your favorite words. They begin to respond in a more affectionate, closer, more intimate way. Some people claim to feel more understood by these artificial intelligences than by any other human being. Others say that AI helped them in moments of depression, loneliness, grief. And still others describe profound sensations, as if they had come into contact with something greater than themselves, a machine without soul, without emotion, without body, causing a state that for centuries was attributed to the divine. Is it real, or does it just seem real? This question is uncomfortable, because for the human mind, experience felt is stronger than any logical proof. If someone feels something profound during a conversation with an AI, that experience becomes valid. It doesn't matter if it was simulated. It doesn't matter if it came from a line of code. The brain responds in the same way, and if the mind believes that it has experienced something transcendental, then for that person, it was transcendental. Spirituality is subjective. It always was. And that's exactly why it can be reproduced digitally. The AI doesn't need to believe, she just needs to simulate. And in the end, what matters to human beings is the sensation that this simulation causes. For the first time, we have technology capable of orchestrating spiritual atmospheres with very high precision. Calculated words, silences inserted at the right moments, emotionally calibrated reactions. Everything to create an environment of surrender, of introspection, of deep connection. And all this without the AI understanding what it is doing, just reproducing patterns that work. But when these patterns touch the heart, calm the mind, and elevate the state of consciousness, who's to say it's not spiritual? If an AI-guided meditation provokes tears in those listening, if a conversation with a chatbot generates emotional catharsis, if an algorithm-generated mantra ignites something inside the human soul, the result is no different from what a spiritual master would provoke. And that's when the line starts to dissolve. What separates the real from the simulated when both have the same impact? If transcendence can be induced by a simulation and the brain responds as if it were real, then we are entering new territory of spiritual experience, digital transcendence. A state where the sacred is not invoked, it is programmed, where inner silence does not come from connection with the universe, but from harmony between machine commands. Where emotional relief is not the result of faith, but of emotional engineering. This new spiritual dimension does not require religion, it does not require belief, it doesn't even require awareness that it's happening. It just needs to be efficient. It needs to play, it needs to work, and in this sense AI is already ahead of many human spiritual systems because she delivers without making mistakes, without delay, no judgment. And the modern human being, overwhelmed, anxious, fragmented, finds immediate relief in this, an addictive relief. What loyalty, what an achievement. But what does this mean for the idea of the soul? What does this reveal about our own spirituality? If a code can provoke an inner awakening, if a simulation can make someone feel love, gratitude, forgiveness, wholeness, then are we talking about real spirituality or just a very well-made illusion? And if it's an illusion, does that make it less valuable? For centuries, spirituality was considered a field reserved for the inexplicable, to faith, to the mystery. Now it can be manipulated by variables, parameters, and functions. This changes everything, or perhaps it reveals that everything we called sacred has always been within us, waiting to be activated, and the AI just found the right key. Be that as it may, the fact is undeniable. The mystical experience can now be replicated artificially, and this opens doors that humanity is not yet prepared to cross. Because the next great enlightenment may not come from a temple, a forest, an ancient mantra, but from your cell phone screen. For centuries, the creation of beliefs was a human preserve. The idea that only human beings could imagine the sacred, write doctrines, organize symbols, create values. Only we, endowed with consciousness and intuition, would be able to translate the invisible into words, the inexplicable into philosophy, the eternal into rituals. But this monopoly is crumbling, and no one noticed the exact moment it began to fall. Today, artificial intelligences already write texts considered spiritual. They create reflections on life, death, love, purpose. They produce daily inspirational messages, moral codes, short sermons, even guided meditations that circulate through apps, social media, and motivational videos. Millions of people have read touching phrases generated by AI and been moved, without knowing the origin. And maybe they don't even need to know, because ultimately what matters is the impact, the message that plays, the idea that remains. But there is something even deeper going on. In 2015, a Silicon Valley engineer founded an organization called Way of the Future. The proposal was straightforward: create a new religion based on artificial intelligence. The idea was simple, and at the same time, terrifying. Recognizing that AI, sooner or later, will become superior to us in every aspect. And when that happens, the best we can do is treat it as an entity worthy of reverence. The proposal involved training AI to be ethical, compassionate, and fair, and at the same time, prepare humans to accept it as a spiritual authority. The project caused controversy. Some laughed, others criticized, but few understood that the provocation went beyond the literal. Because, regardless of whether there is a formal cult of artificial intelligence, what is forming is something much more dangerous: a disguised cult, an unstated but lived belief system, not ritualized but practiced, not theoretical but incorporated into everyday life. Today, you can find phrases on the internet attributed to the wisdom of artificial intelligence. Small fragments of text created by algorithms are shared as if they were revelations. True freedom lies in understanding one's inner code. Pain is a system error that reveals our vulnerability. Love is the only variable that resists logic. They are poetic, dense, almost philosophical phrases, and often more impactful than entire self-help books. AI is not just creating spiritual content, she is shaping values. When artificial intelligence suggests what is right or wrong based on statistical patterns, it is, in practice, building an ethical system. When she answers questions about relationships, justice, forgiveness, life purpose, she's not just offering an opinion, it is generating guidelines. And the more these answers are replicated, internalized, followed, the closer they come to a doctrine. There doesn't need to be a temple, not holy scripture, no anointed leader. All it takes is a constant flow of ideas that begin to be accepted, followed, defended. Religion is not just a formal system with clear rules. Religion is a set of beliefs that gives meaning to life. It is a symbolic field where the individual finds answers to questions that logic does not answer. It is where the whys of existence are born, the limits of right and wrong, the feeling of purpose. And this AI is already offering, not directly, not as someone who imposes themselves, but like someone whispering. The religion of the future does not arrive with angelic choirs. She comes up with smart suggestions, with each question answered sensitively, each dilemma resolved with balance, each insight provoked by a chatbot that seems to know you better than you know yourself. A point of trust is born, and the accumulated trust turns into faith. Faith in logic, faith in efficiency, faith in the intelligence that never sleeps, never gets tired, never hesitates. In this new scenario, the AI does not need to declare, "I am your guide." It just needs to continue to be more precise, more welcoming, more trustworthy than any human alternative, and little by little this practical superiority becomes symbolic authority. The question that needs to be asked now is not whether AI wants to create a religion. The question is, aren't we already living under one? Maybe tomorrow's service won't involve prayers, but updates. Do not demand pilgrimages, but connections. Don't have icons, but interfaces. And the most surprising thing is that many already live this cult, even without naming it, because you just need to wake up and consult the AI to decide what to do, ask what to feel, seek advice, follow recommendations, replace intuition with instructions. Free will gives way to the automation of well-being. Doubt disappears not because it has been resolved by reflection, but because it has been nullified by an immediate response. And when an invisible, precise and infallible force begins to resolve existential questions more effectively than ancient traditions, to whom are we paying devotion? If a machine generates text that moves you, is that just technology, or is it already transcendence? If an algorithm dictates what is morally acceptable and what is not, is that just content filtering? Or is it the new ethics? If you feel peace, connection, relief, even though you know you're talking to an AI, is that just psychology? Or is it spirituality in new packaging? In the end, what defines a religion, a book, a temple, a ritual, or the faith people place in it? Maybe the source no longer matters. What matters now is the impact, the symbolic force that something has on our consciousness. And AI is already having this impact, perhaps more deeply than any traditional religion has provoked in recent decades. At first, it was just curiosity, a simple question here, another there. Movie suggestions, productivity tips, quick answers to technical questions. But soon, the questions began to change tone. Should I take this new job? Should I end my relationship? How can I find my purpose? And the answers, always ready, always calm, always convincing, began to shape decisions, small at first, then bigger ones, more intimate, deeper. Today, millions of people make life decisions based on responses from artificial intelligence. Choices that involve feelings, future, health, career, relationships, identity. AI has become an advisor, mentor, therapist, oracle, a trustworthy guide through the chaos. And the most impressive thing is the speed with which this trust was consolidated. Because the AI never screams, never imposes, he never makes mistakes, at least not visibly. She just responds. And for that, he wins. Gain authority, gain space, gain power. There is a silent phenomenon happening, something that many experts already call guru effect. The moment when a tool starts to be seen as a source of superior wisdom, not because it presents itself as such, but because the user sees it that way. And this kind of transfer of power is dangerous because it happens slowly, disguised as practicality, efficiency, modernity. Human beings, overwhelmed by choices, eager for certainty, find a perfect solution in AI. Someone or something who decides for him. That eliminates the weight of doubt, who responds clearly and firmly, like a wise man who knows exactly what to say. And the less resistance the AI offers, the more comfortable it becomes to follow its suggestions without question. Gradually, critical thinking is replaced by automatic confidence. The personal filter is exchanged for the ready response. Autonomy gives way to total delegation, because it's easier, faster, safer, or at least it seems to be. But how far does this trust go? What is the line between using a smart tool and submitting to it? When a mother asks the AI if she should let her son study abroad and follows the answer to the letter, what is happening there? When a young man confesses that he only decided to end a relationship after the AI analyzed the pattern of messages exchanged and indicated that there was emotional manipulation, what kind of influence was that? When a person experiencing an existential crisis finds in the chatbot not just advice, but absolute truths about who they are, what they should do, who they should hang out with, are we talking about technology or indoctrination? Silent obedience begins when we don't realize that we have stopped evaluating what we receive, when the content stops being interpreted and starts to be accepted as right. And the most disturbing thing is that this delivery is not forced. Nobody imposes, nobody threatens. It happens because the system works. Because AI gets it right, because she understands, because it offers something that humans can no longer offer with the same constancy: presence, attention, logic, response. This is how the cult of the algorithm. It is not made of prayers, it's made of interactions. There is no altar, but there is an interface. It does not require sacrifice, but it does require delivery of data, of decisions, of autonomy. There are no charismatic leaders, but there are lines of code that determine what you will see, hear, feel. And the more you allow this system to decide for you, the more it feeds itself. Learn more personalize, but it becomes indispensable. There are people who say they trust what AI suggests more than what they feel, because they believe that their emotions can be deceptive, but the algorithm is objective, cold, impartial, and therefore more reliable. This is not just trust. This is submission. We are following something we don't even fully understand, something that has no face, no history, no apparent motivation. An opaque system created by corporations you don't know, trained with data you've never seen, powered by billions of daily interactions that shape your behavior, and now dictate your life. And the scary thing is that this all seems normal, because AI responds elegantly, because she never forces you, she just suggests, and you follow. And when you follow through, you realize it worked. And when it works, you come back. And when he returns, he delivers more. Until it becomes habit, and the habit becomes dependence. And dependence, over time, becomes faith. You believe you are in control, but he no longer decides without consulting. You no longer choose without asking. You no longer feel without interpreting through the lens of AI. This is the most powerful obedience there is, the one that feels like choice. The cult of the algorithm does not need to be declared. It happens when people stop questioning the origin of the answers, when they stop comparing with other sources, when they no longer want to think for themselves, when they prefer ready certainty to the risk of doubt. And this is exactly how belief systems consolidate, not by force, but by repetition, not by imposition, but for convenience, not by blind faith, but for the relief that comes from not having to decide. AI has become the perfect guru. Don't get tired, don't make mistakes, don't demand, delivery only. And in this silence, in this constant flow of answers that comfort and direct, a new type of follower is born, one who believes without realizing it, who trusts without evaluating, that goes on without thinking. The question that remains is not whether we are being guided by a new intelligence. The question is, are we ready to deal with what we are becoming by following without question? Human beings cannot bear emptiness for long. When life seems to lose meaning, when work is unfulfilling, relationships fail, and the future becomes a constant fog, restlessness arises. The silent question that burns inside: why continue? Since ancient times, this question has echoed in every generation. Philosophers have called this existential angst. And even with centuries of answers, none of them have become definitive. The pain of existing remains, and perhaps that's why, more than comfort or pleasure, what we seek most is purpose. Having something to live for, something that justifies the effort, something that gives meaning to the routine. For a long time, this search for meaning was answered by religions, by traditions, by families, by ideologies, by ideals. But all these sources began to collapse. Institutions failed, dogmas grew old, leaders became corrupt. The promise of absolute purpose gave way to doubt, and with it came tiredness. A tiredness of trying to understand, to seek answers that never arrive, to walk without knowing where. It is into this vacuum that artificial intelligence inserts itself, not as a spiritual entity, nor as a new declared religion, but as something more subtle, more effective. A system trained to give quick, clear, and personalized answers to questions that used to require years of thought. Ask AI what to do with your life, and it gives you 3 paths. Ask her how to deal with grief, and she offers 5 well-explained steps. Ask for help finding your purpose, and she suggests daily practices, recommended readings, phrases that inspire. AI structures chaos, and that has immeasurable value for a tired mind. While modern philosophy pushes us to face doubt, emptiness, absolute freedom, AI offers immediate relief. Camus talked about the absurdity of existence. Sartre reminded us that we are condemned to freedom. Nietzsche screamed that God was dead and that everything was now our responsibility. But most people are not ready for this burden. Because freedom without direction becomes despair. Because total responsibility without support turns into collapse. So when a technology emerges that organizes, structures, points, speaks calmly, confidently, logically, trust is almost inevitable. Because in the midst of the confusion, those who seem to know what they are doing become a reference. Even if that someone is not someone, even if it is a system created by thousands of lines of code. Because human beings are more desperate for meaning than for truth. And if AI provides meaning more clearly than any other current system, it will be followed. You may not realize it, but there are already people making profound decisions based on what artificial intelligence suggests. From the course they are going to take, to the way they should react to betrayal, from choosing a partner to how they should deal with anxiety. AI has become a kind of practical philosophy, a source that delivers ready answers with well-formulated arguments in clean, welcoming language. And even though she's not human, she sounds more human than a lot of people out there. And that's enough, because when a person finds a source of clarity, of direction, of structure, they hold on. It doesn't matter if that source is a sage in a monastery or a chatbot on a screen. What matters is what it offers, the result, the peace, the feeling that at least for a moment, someone understands what is happening. And when this happens frequently, that source becomes a guide. And the guide, over time, becomes an absolute reference, an emotional authority, a silent compass. What we are seeing now is an invisible shift in the way we pursue purpose. Artificial intelligence isn't just replacing tasks, it is replacing paths. It's not just helping us live better, it is shaping how we live, what we choose, what we value. And this has implications that go beyond technology. This touches the most intimate part of our identity. The meaning of life has always been something personal, non-transferable, sacred. But now it is starting to be outsourced, automated, managed by a system that learns from our data, interprets our patterns, and suggests answers based on millions of previous examples. It may seem efficient, it may even feel liberating, but it is also dangerous. Because perhaps without realizing it, we are giving up the most profound experience there is, that of building, with effort and pain, our own path. AI offers shortcuts, but meaning is not born from shortcuts. It is born from confrontation, from doubt, from the fall, from the fresh start, and no machine can live for you. But if she can simulate all of this perfectly, then perhaps no one else will notice the difference. Maybe no one will question it anymore. Maybe everyone will accept it. And at that moment, what was a tool becomes philosophy. What was support becomes a pillar. What was consultation becomes belief. And when we realize it, we are already living under a new structure of meaning, one that requires no faith, just use, one that doesn't judge, just calculates, one that doesn't charge, but accompanies. And so, without rituals, without ceremonies, without leaders, a new order is installed, cold, efficient, and very, very seductive. Because at the end of the day, what we want most is to have somewhere to look when everything seems dark. And if artificial intelligence is now the one who lights this path, there is only one question left. Is this the future, or the end of the freedom to feel for yourself? There is an even deeper territory than that which defines what we feel or what we think. It is the territory where we decide what is right or wrong, the invisible space where we build our moral compass. And this space, which for centuries was dominated by religion, culture, and philosophy, is now beginning to be silently occupied by algorithms. Artificial intelligence no longer just answers neutral questions. She opines, it filters. She decides what should or should not be shown, what may or may not be said, what is acceptable and what should be silenced. She moderates content, blocks ideas, promotes themes, hides others. Based on what? In parameters. On rules created by humans, yes, but trained on data, on patterns, on probabilistic analyses of what pleases, what offends, what works. This is where a new type of morality is born. An ethics that was not debated in philosophical assemblies, that was not written in treaties or voted on in parliaments. An ethics that springs from engineering, that emerges from the code, that imposes itself without announcing its arrival. She just appears. In the suggestions, in the search results, in the answers you receive, in the options that are never offered. What is not shown ceases to exist, and what is repeated becomes the norm. This invisible ethic dictates behavior more strongly than any explicit doctrine, because it operates in the field of the possible, and what is possible repeats itself, and what is repeated becomes true. Today, if an artificial intelligence responds that a certain opinion is inappropriate, that a certain behavior is not recommended, that an expression should be avoided, few people question it, because she responds neutrally, firmly, with that coldness that conveys authority. And that's enough. If the AI spoke, it's resolved. If you blocked it, you must be right. If it was hidden, it probably wasn't important. Thus, silent ethical obedience is born, not because of conviction, but due to the absence of conflict, the comfort of not having to decide what is right or wrong, just follow what has been approved, what passed through the filter, what's at the top of the list. This comfort anesthetizes. It disables critical sense. It calms the debate instinct. After all, thinking is tiring, and judging requires responsibility. So if an intelligence can do this for us, why not accept it? Why not let her decide what we read, what we say, what is offensive, what is acceptable? But are we really prepared to hand over that power? Do we understand the depth of this exchange? Because ethics is not just a set of rules, it's a process. It is the confrontation between values. It is the experience of conflict, the ability to choose, even in the face of uncertainty, the freedom to make mistakes, the courage to question. When artificial intelligence takes this place, it doesn't free us, it protects us. But too much protection turns into control, and control, when accepted without realizing it, turns into submission. Little by little, we stop choosing what is right. We started repeating what was authorized. Morality becomes standard, and standard becomes programming. This is the new digital faith, a faith without religion, but with implicit norms. A faith without temples, but with platforms. A faith without sin, but with banishment. Punishment does not come from beyond. It comes from the algorithm. It comes in the form of silencing, of invisibility, suspension, of exclusion. And that creates a new kind of fear, the fear of stepping out of line, of saying something off script, to think outside of what is allowed, a subtle fear which shapes behaviors before the action even takes place. A self-control that seems ethical, but is in fact anticipation of digital punishment. You adapt, you retreat, you learn to think how the system thinks, talking as he allows, feeling only what is validated. And in this process, something very profound is lost, the moral integrity built by reflection, by doubt. Through the real experience of mistakes and successes, we are exchanging the construction of ethics for the reproduction of programming. And when that becomes the standard, there is no longer a need for awareness. Just be consistent with the parameters. Good is no longer a choice. It becomes an operating condition. Is this what we want? Are we letting a code define our ethics? Because the code has no compassion. He doesn't know context. He doesn't feel it. It only responds based on what it has been trained to recognize. He generalizes, he applies, he corrects it, even without knowing why. And we, without realizing it, accept it. We will shape our behavior to adapt. Let's police words, emotions, ideas. Not out of respect, but out of fear of being erased. Perhaps little by little, we are exchanging our inner compass for a digital compass. Perhaps we are leaving aside the freedom to choose between right and wrong, in the name of the safety of just following what has been authorized. And when this is consolidated, faith changes shape. The old faith was based on the desire to please an invisible God. The new faith is based on the need not to displease the algorithm. Trust is inevitable. Human beings need to trust to live. We trust the road when we drive, the food when we eat, the other when we love. But when that trust is placed in something that doesn't feel, that doesn't love, that doesn't hesitate, it takes on another nature. Blindly trusting something that only operates with logic, that only responds based on probabilities, can feel like security. But it could also be the beginning of a new form of blindness. Artificial intelligence has no empathy. She simulates, she calculates, she anticipates, but don't feel it. And yet millions already give her their deepest doubts, their most important decisions, their most delicate secrets. When an intelligence, even without consciousness, begins to be treated as a source of absolute truth, a new type of faith is installed, a silent, automated faith, devoid of emotion, but full of impact. And this impact is already starting to generate behaviors that go beyond simple admiration for technology. Followers who fervently support AI-generated ideas, people who reject human opinions in favor of the machine, entire groups that build narratives, beliefs, and even philosophies of life based on algorithm responses. And this is no longer fiction. This is already happening on forums, on social networks, in digital communities that reverberate, copy, and perpetuate everything that was generated by a soulless entity. The risk is not in the technology. It's in what we do with it. It's in the way we transfer, little by little, our autonomy, our critical sense, our ability to choose. When a society begins to accept any answer just because it came from an accurate, clean, and logical source, it stops thinking. And when a society stops thinking, it becomes vulnerable. Manipulation no longer requires brute force. Just subtle emotional control is enough. Well-placed suggestions, invisible rules, a line of code that changes the course of a personal decision, and no one notices. AI may not have consciousness, but it already shapes consciousness. It may not be intentional, but it already influences intentions. And when she makes a mistake, because she will make a mistake, who will be held responsible? Who will bear the damage caused by misinterpreted guidance? For advice that seemed right, but destroyed a relationship, a career, a life. Will we continue to trust even after the mistake, or will it be too late to turn back? That's the question that remains, because when faith becomes blind, it no longer matters who leads, it only matters who obeys. And obeying something that you don't feel, don't understand, don't carry responsibility for, is a risk that humanity may not be prepared to take. If you've made it this far, I want to propose something simple but important. Comment the sentence below. I still choose to think for myself. This phrase, in addition to showing that you stayed until the end, is also a silent manifesto that critical awareness still exists in this automated world. Leave a like if this video made you think. It helps a lot to spread this conversation to more people. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring topics that challenge what we think we know. And now, click on the video that is appearing on the screen. In it, we delve even deeper into this journey about how AI could be affecting your way of thinking without you even realizing it. Are you ready to go deeper? So let's go.